I heard the bells on Instagram, and it inspired me to do a drawing of the Basilica of St Mary in Minneapolis. That didn't really work as a song, did it? Well, anyway, I am drawing the Basilica because they're celebrating 100 years as America's first basilica. And they're also doing yeoman's work supporting their community right now in Minneapolis. So I'm doing a drawing for them. So let's get to it. I hope that Father Daniel will like my sketch. I chose a photo that I found on the interwebs of the church, and it's got some nice perspective to it. Pretty simple, straightforward 2-point perspective with a little 3-point. So that means it has some of the angles go off to the left, some to the right vanishing point, but there's also a third. So in the middle, you would see the lines go straight, but they tilt in on the outside edges. That's because we're looking up at it ever so slightly. So I did my pencil sketch and then applied masking fluid to it because I wanted a loose sketch. I know this sketch here does not really imply loose sketch because it's got a lot of detail drawn in it, but I wanted a loose wash, I guess is probably what I should say. And I wanted the lines to be able to be a little looser and wonkier and that sort of thing, but I needed to have the structure of it down first. So I began by painting masking fluid. This is Pebeo's drawing gum is what they call it, but it's masking fluid. It's supposed to be blue, but mine partially came out purple. And why is that? Because I ran a little test on a scrap piece of paper to make sure that this drawing gum could fight off the ink that I was going to use. Because inks are much more pigmented, they're staining. Sometimes they escape underneath of masking fluids, that sort of thing. So I just wanted to test and make sure before I got this far that that was going to work. Well, this brush is the one that I happened to use for the quick test, and it had some of the purplish color in it. So I have some purple masking fluid on my piece now. There's only one place where any of that color stayed. The rest of it did disappear. But I would recommend not using the same brush for inking as well as using your masking fluid. Mine is blue because if I had white masking fluid, I wouldn't really be able to see very well what I was looking at. So I tend to prefer a blue one like Pebeo's. It's I think one of the least expensive ones that I like. And the Grumbacher is orange, and I use that as well. So at least they have some color to them so you can see where you've applied the masking fluid. You also want to protect your brush before you start doing masking fluid stuff by swirling it in a little bit of dishwashing liquid. That will just kind of coat the hairs of the brush so that they don't get tangled too badly. But also just rinse your brush a lot. Rinse it when you're done. Wash it really good. And this one's going to get a good rinsing because it's got pink ink in it. But not till after the whole thing is done. And then I will clean all my brushes very, very well because the Iroshizuku inks that I'm going to use are, as I said, highly pigmented and very, very strong. So I'm going to begin by splashing on some loose color. Now this does happen to be sandy draws, not sandy paints. I get that. But sometimes when you draw something, you want to have some color in it. So that's what I'm doing. I put water down first because, again, these are highly staining paints. And when you put any of the color down on the page, it's immediately going to stain the paper, which means you're going to get some hard edges if you're not really careful. And I wasn't super careful here, so I had to do some kind of fussing around. But I used a dropper to put some of the ink in these little bowls. I have Iroshizuku. I can't even hardly say it. Iroshizuku inks, Kon-peki and TsuTsuJi are the two colors. I'll have them listed in the doobly-doo. But I've got the blue and the pink in bowls, and then I mixed a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the pink so I could get a purple made of the two of them. And I put water in them so that they'll be thinner. Because in my test that I did, as soon as I put full strength color down, it was like, oh my goodness, that was like way stronger. than I wanted for this. I wanted something a little softer. Even softer than this would have been great, but, better part of valor, right? But you'll see that even though I dab off some color, there's not much color that leaves the paper when you dab off inks because they stain. I mean, that's just kind of the point of this is that they do stain the paper and that sort of thing. So got the whole thing really dried. I did dab off at least some of the moisture so it wouldn't take forever to dry. And then I decided to put some shadows in here using the same colors, mostly the purple and the pink. And that's going to help me to not have to put quite as much detail in when I do the line drawing. Because if I didn't do this, I was probably going to feel like I should maybe take a smaller pen and draw in every brick or something so I could darken those sides, because I wanted those sides to be in real shadows so that would make the highlights pop. All of that white that I've marked off with the masking fluid. So I decided I would just go in and do these shadows manually. And that way I could decide whether or not I still needed to do much in the way of ink work in order to deepen any shadows in particular spots. This is a pretty common practice for me when I start thinking about whatever it is I'm going to create. I don't often just dive in and then see what happens, especially if it's something like this that I want to gift to someone or that sort of thing. I think about what's going to make all the parts work together the way that I want them to. And that's why I did some tests on scrap paper so I could make sure I kind of had a plan for what was going to happen. Next up is removing the masking fluid once everything's completely dry. Now, the masking fluid needs to be really clean, so I always wipe it off. If you have any watercolor or ink on that gooey stuff, and it will hide in the cracks, then you could drag it across the paper. You would be amazed at how many paintings I ruined because I didn't clean it off, and the motion of trying to remove this stuff just pushed that color all over. So I wiped it off carefully and made sure that was really good and dry before I started using the rubber cement pickup is what this is called, or sometimes it's a masking fluid pickup. A lot of different names for it at different companies where you can buy it online. All the supplies are going to be linked in the doobly-doo, by the way. But now it's time to enjoy the drawing part, which is what Sandy Draws is all about, is drawing. And I am excited that you're here and watching this video so that I know you are someone who also either likes to draw or thinks you need to learn to draw because you want to be able to paint and you need to learn to draw to make your paintings better. Because that's really what's going to happen when you start doing more drawing. Your paintings will get better, because if your underlying drawing isn't right, if like the perspective on this building wasn't right, it wouldn't matter how beautifully I did that wash. It was still going to look wonky. And there are going to be some wonky things in here, but at least they're not wonky things that would have bothered me. There were some things that I had to do for this drawing, like on the left side of, I think that's called a cupola, maybe at the top, the roundy sort of part up there, the dome. In that, I wanted to make sure that the left side is the same as the front-facing side. So I took it into Photoshop and I lightened it until I could see what detail was within those dark areas, because in the photo it's really dark. And then just kept working my way through all of the details on all of this. I'm using a TWSBI Eco pen. This is the medium nib. And it tends to be my favorite, even though I do use the fine nib and the extra fine. This one just has, I guess, a chunkier line to it. It's not chunky like a stub nib, but it's a little heavier, and it keeps me from getting into fussy details. And on this one, I didn't want to get overly fussy. I wanted it to feel like an architectural rendering-ish, but I didn't want to feel like it was done by an architect. And there are some artists who can do that kind of work wonderfully. I am not one of them. I prefer something a little looser, a little more expressive. And so this is my pen of choice here. And one of the things that doing the line work after all of this other prep work does is that allows me to just take the pen and clean up anything that didn't work great, because masking fluid is really hard to get a really nice mark. Some of the marks you can see are just terrible. The windows are crooked, the snow on the ground is just like these hunky, chunky marks. I have to figure out how to fix those, and fixing them with a pen is going to be a lot easier than trying to use a brush that gets gunked up with the masking fluid, because that stuff doesn't make a really thin line that can taper. Even if you use something like a Kitska, or sometimes it's called a fluid writer, and it's basically a little well that has a needle tip on the end of it, so you can get a finer tip. But I find that that thing gets gunked up and stuck with the masking fluid in it, so it doesn't flow as nicely as I can get with a brush. So even though I get chunkier lines and they're not very pretty, I can use the pen to kind of clear some of that up. But I thought I'd tell you about my one trip to Minneapolis. It was actually a trip through, because I was on my way elsewhere. I was doing a lot of teaching and traveling, and I wanted to see Minneapolis, say that I'd been there. So I went on my way somewhere else and drove through. And it was a Saturday night when I stopped in, stayed overnight, and then I heard the bells and decided I was going to look up what church that was and go to service there on Sunday. And so I've been inside of there, and it's a beautiful place. And given that they just had this past weekend, from what I found out on their Instagram, they just celebrated 100 years of being America's first basilica. So I guess congratulations. I'm not sure. I guess that's an accomplishment, even though it's something somebody accomplished a long time ago. But I thought they, might enjoy this drawing, and I'm going to write a letter with it to Father Daniel, and I'm going to let him know that if they would like to use this for, I don't know, a fundraiser or something, and try to support the work that they're doing for their people there in Minneapolis and all that they're going through right now, then he could do that. If he wants to, use it for some kind of fundraising, he could. If he wants to make prints of it, sell them for the church, he has my permission to do whatever he wants to with this drawing. So I will release it into their care. And it's one of those things that I have done on occasion when I go places and I visit things, especially if I find out, like with this church, with the whole city of Minneapolis, that there's things going on there that they actually could use some help, and I have the skills to provide something that might help. So I send stuff out to places all the time, it seems. Well, I shouldn't say all the time. Probably 5 or 6 times a year, I try to find somewhere that I can just gift something to somebody without asking. Just send it and say, "Here, if you want this, it's yours to do with as you will." So if I hear back, which I don't always, if I hear back from Father Daniel, I'll let you know. Report back here on the channel, especially if they do a fundraiser that other people can participate in. If you would like to, if they decide to do prints and you want to get a print of this to support them in their work, supporting their community. And I will also leave their social links down below. They have a very small following on their Instagram page, a little bigger Facebook page, but you can check out more about that church if you're interested. So as the drawing went on, I was, just trying to figure out what else I was going to include here. The little blobs at the bottom, the little tiny ones, are going to be people. And because I didn't feel like I could just draw the building without any people, because the church, as I remember as a little girl, we always said, "Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door, and out come the people. Church is the people." So I wanted to include them. And then those blobs that are out there, they have some trees around the building. And I didn't have any pictures. I didn't look very deeply, but didn't have any pictures of what they look like in the snow. But they're deciduous trees. So in the photo that I had looked at for my reference, they were bare trees at the time. So I'm just imagining them being maybe snow on them. I don't know. I guess it depends on how recently the snow had fallen or whatever, because I'm making up the time of year for this. And I'll also have to make up where the trees are actually at because my photo wasn't clear on some of that. But continued on with the rest of the architectural portions of the drawing, the windows and that kind of thing. With windows, you don't actually have to draw real carefully around them. A lot of it, if you can suggest that there's a window and it's got a shape of some kind, that's more than enough. I mean, even with any of these shapes, any of the surrounding areas above windows and recessed marble and stonework and that kind of stuff in any building, eh, suggesting it is often, the better part of valor rather than trying to draw every little bit of it. I even avoided drawing all the little figures on the triangle portion that's right above the front of the church. There's like so many little figures in there. I zoomed in and I found a couple other pictures of specifically those areas, and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't possibly draw that. So I just made squiggles. And then all my people were also just going to be squiggles because they're just kind of hanging around the building, lots and lots of them. Hopefully, they are all people who are helping in their community and doing shopping for people who can't go out shopping and taking kids to school and that sort of thing. So once I got through with this part, then I had to deal with what on earth to do for the trees. So I decided the trees, I would get out a different pen. This is a dip pen, and the dip pen you dip directly into the ink. And so I figured maybe I could do the branch work in that and not do it in black so that it would feel a little more snowy, perhaps. I wasn't sure whether it would work or not, but figured it couldn't hurt to try it. The tree blobs didn't look really great, so I will fix those in a minute because it just kind of looks like a big loop-de-loop with the way that the ink just kind of landed on the page. But I started by using the blue ink, which is the Kon-peki ink is the name of it, and used that one full strength. But then when it came to the lighter lines, I wanted something that wasn't going to be as dark as I moved to the tops of the trees, and I used the watered down version in the little bowl of the TsuTsuJi ink so that I could have a little bit of color still trailing upward, but sort of let that fade since it was both lighter and these are much thinner lines than the rest of the drawing. So that's another vote for having several different types of pens at your disposal when you're working on a drawing, because you never know when you're going to potentially need a texture or something to look like it's lighter and thinner. If I had done the branches in those big chunky lines, a lot of people would be stuck looking at the trees rather than looking at the building itself. So here's where I decided I was going to add more color to a few places. That little portion of building is hidden around the corner and had a shadow on it, and I kind of just threw the masking fluid over it, apparently. Did not get that part handled. A few other areas that I wanted to just have some more pink on the front of the building and kind of color in a few areas. Make a few spots, a few little shadows, a little bit darker. Anything that I missed along the way. And then that dark roof up there needed to be filled in just a little bit better. This over on the right is another building off in the distance. And then here's where I started trying to fix that somehow the shapes of the trees, they would look more like individual trees instead of like a looped blob. And then added a little bit of color into the people. Just, random blobs of the pink and the blue and the purple, letting the colors kind of mix and let all the people be walking around the church, marching around or waiting in line to get in or whatever. And then since it is, winter right now when I'm doing this and when I'm sending this to them, I used a Copic Acrea pen. This is a white pen that's great for things like snow, but anything that you want to cover what's underneath of it. This thing even covers reds in a lot of different mediums. And that's a rarity. So good for Copic for coming up with something like that. So that's my dishes with my inks in it, the pink, the blue, and the pink blue mixture. And those are both Iroshizuku inks, Kon-peki and TsuTsuJi. Love their bottles. They're just so pretty. The black ink that I used was carbon black ink, and that's the Pebeo drawing gum that I used for masking. So let me know in a comment what you think Father Daniel's going to say when he gets a surprise package in the mail with a drawing that he never asked for. And if you have suggestions on what they should do to fundraise with this drawing potentially. If they end up coming up with something, I will indeed let you know, as I said. Also, over on my Substack today, I have found some swatches from other Iroshizuku inks, and I'd like you to tell me if there's a particular one you think I should get, because I'm thinking about treating myself to a bottle of ink, and that's over on my Substack. There's a link in the doobly-doo. And on Substack on Friday, I actually have a live stream coming for my Atelier members. That's my paid subscribers. So if you're one of those, make sure you join in. We are going to make some art together. We're going to do a wash and ink with coffee and ink pen. So come join me for that. And I will see you all next week. I've got a little announcement coming next week, so be sure to come back next Tuesday, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.